He made his pregnant wife. Apologized to Mistress, she filed divorce and won big. They say marriage is built on trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. But what happens when those foundations crack beneath the weight of secrets and deception? Meet Cassandra Evans, a gentle soul who believed she had found her forever in James Peterson. Little did she know that her husband was leading a double life with a woman who reveled in breaking hearts. Miranda Brooks. In the final act of betrayal, James demanded that his pregnant wife apologize to his mistress. The fallout was nothing short of catastrophic. This is the story of how Cassandra found the strength to fight back and won bigger than anyone ever imagined. Cassandra Evans grew up in the warm embrace of a loving family in the sleepy town of Willow Grove, with a population under 10,000. Willow Grove was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know one another's business. Yet despite the occasional nosiness of her neighbors, Cassandra always found solace in the community's kindness. They rallied together in times of need, celebrated life's milestones, and believed wholeheartedly in the sanctity of marriage. Raised by her parents, Douglas and Eleanor Evans, local hardware store owners, Cassandra learned the value of empathy, hard work, and loyalty. She was the oldest of 3 siblings, with younger twin brothers, Marcus and Mason. While the boys busied themselves with sports and pranks, Cassandra immersed herself in books. She grew to appreciate the power of words and the delicate complexities of human emotion. At the age of 20, eager to expand her horizons, she left Willow Grove for the bustling city of Greenfield. She had gained admission to a reputable university on an academic scholarship, majoring in communications. Bright-eyed and hopeful, Cassandra juggled part-time work at a local cafe to make ends meet. Those years were both liberating and challenging, but she never once forgot her roots, nor did she lose sight of her dream to build a stable family of her own, one that mirrored the love and respect she witnessed between her parents. It was around this time that she met James Peterson. He was 3 years older, working in a junior executive position at a real estate firm. Her friend Laura Kim, who studied business with him, introduced them during a university charity gala. James seemed by all accounts like a catch. He was polished, carried himself with an air of confidence, and had a polite charm that easily won people over. His conversation with Cassandra that evening glided effortlessly from topic to topic: art, travel, family, dreams. Over the next few months, they discovered shared values. Both wanted to start families someday, both admired strong family ties, and both dreamed of stable futures, unblemished by the heartbreak they had each witnessed in other people's relationships. Their romantic courtship was peppered with thoughtful dates, musicals at the local theater weekend, picnics by the lake, and cozy evenings spent cooking simple dinners in Cassandra's humble off-campus apartment. After 2 years of dating, James proposed in the most romantic of ways, kneeling on the same lake shore where they often picnicked. He had a ring fashioned with a small diamond surrounded by tiny emeralds, Cassandra's birthstone. Tears of joy wet her cheeks as she said, yes. Their marriage, held in her hometown of Willow Grove, was a modest but heartfelt ceremony. Surrounded by close friends and family, they exchanged vows that promised unwavering devotion. For the first 5 years, it truly was bliss. James's career soared. He transferred from junior positions to managerial ones, often traveling to meet clients for the real estate company, Midtown Realty Group. Cassandra advanced in her own line of work as well. Initially, she took an internship at a local broadcasting station, eventually working her way up to become a content editor for a lifestyle website. Financially, they were stable, even thriving. They bought a small but cozy condo near James's office building, Cassandra's parents, now aging, visited occasionally proud of the life their daughter had built. The couple discussed starting a family, yet had waited for the right time due to busy work schedules and James's constant business trips. Unbeknownst to Cassandra, cracks began to form beneath the pristine surface of their marriage. James was charming and doted on her, but he had a weakness for recognition and the thrill of new conquests. With success came temptation parties with big names in real estate, mingling with ambitious newcomers to the industry, and the comfort of hotel bars after long days of negotiations. James's travel schedule provided ample opportunity for indiscretions. At first, the changes were subtle. James worked longer hours, returned from trips seemingly distant, carried his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. Then, the once thoughtful gestures like calling her at midday to say he loved her dwindled to near extinction. Still, Cassandra believed in the man she married. She chalked it up to stress at work, telling herself they would return to the love-laced days of old, once life slowed down. Everything shifted drastically when Cassandra, after quietly suspecting she might be pregnant, took an at-home test that came out positive. Elated, she awaited James's return from a weekend trip, imagining how she would surprise him with the news. She planned it meticulously, a candlelit dinner at home, soft music playing, and a little onesie with the words, "Hello, Daddy," embroidered on it, which she'd place at the center of the table. She imagined his joyous tears the promise of a new chapter, bringing them closer than ever. But life seldom goes according to plan, and this seemingly perfect couple had no idea that a storm was about to upend their entire world. James's flight from Chicago arrived late that Sunday evening. It was nearly 10 when Cassandra heard the keys jingling at the condo door. She hurried to greet him, brimming with excitement. They had texted intermittently during the day, but James had seemed distracted. He shrugged it off as last-minute meeting requirements and flight delays. He stepped inside, looking worn but handsome in his crisp navy suit. Cassandra noticed a faint perfume on him that she didn't recognize. For a moment, her heart gave a tiny lurch of concern. She pushed it aside. People could brush up against others in crowded airports, or maybe the flight attendant's perfume lingered. She told herself there had to be a reasonable explanation. On the dining table, the candles flickered softly, illuminating a modest spread of homemade pasta and salad. The little onesie was neatly placed in a small gift box in front of James's plate. Even through her simmering questions, Cassandra's excitement overshadowed her suspicions. "I have a surprise for you," she said. Guiding him to the table, James's face lit up a fraction. "This is nice," he murmured, taking in the scene. Yet something about his demeanor was off-tense. He loosened his tie and forced a tired smile. When he opened the box, he stared at the tiny garment. For a split second, Cassandra thought she saw a flash of panic in his eyes, before his expression softened into a grin. "You're pregnant?" he asked, voice laced with disbelief. Cassandra nodded, tears sparkling. "I found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you in a special way." He stepped forward, drew her into a half-hearted hug, and whispered, "That's wonderful news." But Cassandra sensed some hesitation in his tone, as if his mind was elsewhere. In the days that followed, James's behavior became increasingly erratic. One moment he was doting, offering to bring her herbal teas or reading through parenting books with genuine curiosity. The next he was glued to his phone, texting or calling at odd hours, walking into different rooms for privacy. Cassandra felt a prickly sense of unease every time she caught him lying about mundane details like where he had lunch or why he had come home an hour later than he claimed. She tried to dismiss her worries. After all, she was pregnant now, and stress was the last thing she needed. But the seeds of suspicion had already been planted, and they began to grow nourished by each small lie or evasion. To clear her mind, Cassandra confided in her close friend and former college roommate, Laura Kim. Over coffee at a trendy cafe, Cassandra explained how James's mood, swings, and secrecy were getting under her skin. Laura listened intently, stirring her latte, her expression growing more concerned. "Sometimes he'll go to the balcony to talk," Cassandra said, her voice trembling slightly. "And when I walk into the room, he hangs up immediately, or switches apps on his phone. I don't want to be that wife who snoops, but I can't shake the feeling." Laura pursed her lips, leaning in closer so others wouldn't overhear. "Look, Cassie, you have to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. That doesn't mean you confront him with accusations right away, but you should keep your eyes open." Cassandra thanked her friend for the advice, but remained torn. A part of her wanted proof before making any allegations. Another part wanted to believe James was simply stressed. After all, the real estate market had been volatile lately, and a baby on the way was a huge life change. Yet the more she observed his habits, the less convinced she became of his innocence. One evening, she quietly approached the bedroom door while James was on a call. She overheard him speaking in hushed tones. "I told you I'd handle it. She doesn't suspect anything serious." "Not yet. Just keep calm." Those words cut through her like a knife. Who was he speaking to in such a secretive manner? And what exactly was he handling? Unable to sleep, Cassandra lay awake, pondering every possible scenario. Was it a business deal gone wrong? A personal debt he hadn't mentioned? Or her heart pounded at the thought, was there another woman? Her worries intensified when small clues began to surface. A lipstick stain on a shirt collar, a hotel room key for a night. He supposedly stayed at a colleague's condo. Text messages that he claimed were from his boss, yet were written in a flirtatious tone. The pregnancy, once a beacon of hope, now felt overshadowed by a looming black cloud of betrayal. Before she jumped to conclusions, Cassandra decided she needed actual evidence. She borrowed an old phone from Laura and discreetly installed a simple GPS tracker app on James's phone, a step that felt utterly invasive, but also necessary for her own peace of mind. She rationalized her choice by telling herself that if she found nothing, then she would breathe a sigh of relief and never speak of it again. However, the day after installing the tracker, Cassandra watched in dismay as James's location pinged at a fancy downtown hotel at 9 in the evening, on a night he claimed he'd be working late at the office. Her heart sank like a stone. She wanted to call him immediately, but her hands shook too much to hold the phone steady. Desperate for answers, she found herself scrolling through social media. A new account under the name Miranda Brooks popped up as a suggested friend. The account's profile picture was a sultry shot of a woman with caramel brown hair and a striking gaze. She listed her workplace as freelance real estate consultant. Cassandra clicked only to discover an array of glamorous photos featuring expensive dinners, business trips, and a certain recurring man in the background, James Peterson. The puzzle pieces began to fit. The late-night phone calls, the odd perfume, the suspicious texting. James was having an affair, and this Miranda Brooks was likely the other woman. Overwhelmed Cassandra found tears rolling down her cheeks. She placed a hand protectively over her belly, feeling the life growing inside her. How could the man she loved betray her like this, especially now of all times? 2 days after discovering the damning GPS location and Miranda's social media profile, Cassandra gathered her courage to confront James. She arranged a quiet dinner at home, hoping privacy would allow them to speak freely. However, James walked in that evening with a flurry of excuses. He claimed last-minute emails demanded his immediate attention, forcing him to shut himself in the study. Cassandra gave him space, but her anger simmered. She looked at the half-cooked dinner on the stove. Her appetite gone. After an hour of waiting, she marched into the study where James hunched over his laptop, frowning at the screen as though it held the world's problems. He glanced up. Startled. "Cass, I'm really busy." "Can it wait?" Her response was surprisingly calm. "No, it can't. We need to talk." Her voice must have betrayed her turmoil, because James set his laptop aside. "Is everything okay?" Cassandra crossed her arms. "Does the name Miranda Brooks mean anything to you?" James blinked his face, momentarily devoid of expression. Then a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. "She's a consultant we've worked with on a few real estate deals." Why, heart-pounding, Cassandra kept her gaze locked on his. "I saw her social media photos. You're in quite a few of them, looking more than just business associates." His jaw set in a rigid line. "You've been snooping." "Yes, I have," she replied, her voice trembling. "When my husband comes home with suspicious perfume on him, disappears to questionable locations and lies about it, I feel justified. I'm pregnant, James, and I deserve the truth." He rose from the chair, exhaling slowly. "Okay, I won't lie to you anymore. Miranda and I have been seeing each other." Hearing the confirmation out loud felt like a punch to her stomach. Cassandra leaned against the desk for support, tears brimming. How could you do this? How long James had the decency to look ashamed? It started about 6 months ago. We got close during some out-of-town conferences. Cassandra stared at him in disbelief. 6 months ago meant he'd been cheating on her for nearly half a year, all while they were discussing starting a family. "Is she the reason you've been distant? The reason you keep lying to me?" He nodded, his voice stilted. "But it's complicated. I love you, Cassandra. I really do." In a surge of heartbreak-fueled rage, she hurled the nearest object, a pen holder, across the room. "Don't you dare say you love me after what you've done. I'm carrying your baby, James. A baby you swore you wanted as much as I did." A tortured expression twisted his features. "I never wanted to hurt you or this child. It just happened, and I got in over my head." Cassandra wiped away angry tears. "Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice. Multiple choices every day. Do you have any idea what you've put me through?" James tried to approach her, but she stepped back. "Stay away from me. I can't even look at you right now." He let out a heavy breath. "So, what now? Do you want a divorce?" Her mind spun with possibilities. Divorce, separation, or perhaps therapy. She had always believed marriage vows were sacred, but she never expected to be betrayed so profoundly. "I don't know," she whispered. "I need time to think." The next few days were a haze. Cassandra took some time off work, citing pregnancy-related stress, which was only half a lie. She holed up at Laura's apartment for a while, confiding in her friend between sobbing fits. Meanwhile, James slept at their condo alone, calling her repeatedly, texting apologies, promising he'd end it with Miranda. The heartbreak wasn't just emotional, but physical too. Cassandra's appetite waned, and she struggled to keep food down. She worried about the baby. At a routine checkup, her doctor advised her to manage her stress levels, warning that elevated anxiety could affect her pregnancy. It was the wake-up call she needed, determined to protect her child. Cassandra returned to the condo, telling James that if they had any chance of salvaging their marriage, he'd have to cut all ties with Miranda. Immediately, James promised he would. He even handed over his phone to show that he had deleted Miranda's number and blocked her on all social platforms. Despite the betrayal, a small part of Cassandra wanted to believe him. This was her husband, the father of her unborn child. Could they possibly rebuild? For a moment, it seemed plausible. James accompanied her to prenatal checkups, talking about future nursery decorations, and even reading a parenting book before bed. Cassandra's heart softened, if only slightly. Maybe they could move past this. Then Miranda Brooks reappeared in their lives, like a tempest refusing to be tamed. She texted James, emailing him relentlessly, claiming that he couldn't just throw her away after everything Cassandra found out when she intercepted an email that popped up on James's phone at breakfast. The subject line read, "You owe me furious." Cassandra confronted James again. "What is this?" she demanded, brandishing the phone. James rubbed his temples. "She's not taking no for an answer. I'm not responding. I swear I'm not." A series of expletive-laden messages from Miranda followed, each more threatening than the last. She hinted at exposing James's infidelity to business associates, turning up at their condo, and even confronting Cassandra directly. James tried to reason with Miranda, but each attempt only fueled her anger. What Cassandra didn't know was that Miranda had her own set of motives, beyond romance motives, that would soon culminate in a bizarre demand. An apology from Cassandra. To her it started as a single text. "Your wife owes me an apology." Sent in the middle of the night, it displayed on James's phone with a jarring insistence. He read it, staring at the screen in disbelief. Cassandra, disturbed by the phone's glow, rolled over. "What is it now?" she asked wearily. He showed her the text. "She's lost it," he muttered. "She says you owe her an apology." Cassandra sat up, outraged. What on earth could I possibly owe her an apology for? Over the next few days, the messages from Miranda became a flood, mixing threats with bizarre pleas for redemption. In her twisted worldview, she blamed Cassandra for standing in the way of her happiness with James. She claimed that Cassandra's refusal to divorce James was unfair, considering he was never truly faithful. Miranda's brand of logic was as toxic as it was baffling. She was the mistress, yet she positioned herself as a victim. One evening, James arrived home, visibly shaken. He shut the door, checking behind him, as though someone might be following. Cassandra stood in the kitchen, finishing a cup of tea. "What happened?" she asked. Miranda showed up at my office. He said, his voice trembling. She caused a huge scene, screaming about how I'd promised her a future. My boss heard everything. It was humiliating, to say the least. Cassandra felt a strange combination of anger and pity. "She's unhinged," she declared, placing her cup on the counter. "We need to consider legal protection, like a restraining order." James shook his head. "I don't want to escalate matters. I just want her out of our lives." It was the very next day that Miranda showed up at their condo. Despite the security guards' best efforts to keep her out, Cassandra opened the door to find Miranda standing there, posture rigid, eyes ablaze. She wore a tight-fitting red dress and reeked of desperation. "I need to talk to James." "Miranda!" snapped, trying to push past Cassandra. Cassandra blocked the doorway. "He's not here. And even if he were, you're not welcome." Miranda's lips curled into a sneer. "So this is the wife," she said, looking Cassandra up and down. "I thought you'd be prettier." Normally such a dig would have rolled off Cassandra's back, but in her vulnerable state, it stung. "You need to leave," she repeated firmly. Adrenaline surging as Miranda's eyes flickered toward Cassandra's pregnant belly. A strange, almost feral expression crossed her face. "Carrying James's baby doesn't make you special. I could have given him children, better ones than you ever could." Before Cassandra could retort, Laura, who had come over to check on her friend, suddenly appeared in the foyer. "Leave or I'm calling the police." Laura said sharply. With a final glare, Miranda turned on her heel and stormed off. Cassandra's heart pounded as she locked the door. She felt an odd mix of relief and terror. It was clear that Miranda was dangerously fixated, and there was no telling what she might do next. However, the darkest twist was yet to come. That evening, James paced the living room phone, in hand pale as a ghost. Cassandra, exhausted, was about to head to bed when James blocked her path. "Miranda threatened to accuse me of harassment. If I don't comply with her demand," he said quietly. She wants you to apologize to her publicly." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. "She wants me, the pregnant wife, to apologize to her, the mistress." He nodded, eyes full of panic. "She said she'll go to the media, claim I manipulated her, or worse. She could cost me my job. I could lose everything. Cass." A flare of anger lit Cassandra's features. "What about what I lose? My dignity, my self-respect." James reached for her shoulders. "I'm not saying we should do it. I'm just telling you what she said. She's threatening to make false allegations. Lawsuits. She's even hinted at going after you, saying you've slandered her by calling her unhinged." Cassandra's entire body trembled. "So to be clear, you're considering forcing your pregnant wife to apologize publicly to your mistress just to save your skin." James dropped his gaze. "I don't know what to do. My boss is already furious at the office scene," she caused. "If she brings more drama, I'm finished." Silence engulfed the room. Cassandra stared at him, feeling her heart shatter all over again. She realized in that moment that James's love for her was overshadowed by his fear of losing his job, his reputation, and his precious status. She spoke through gritted teeth. "You've put me through hell, James. Now you have the nerve to ask me to degrade myself to protect you from the consequences of your own actions." James looked torn. "If we don't do something, she's going to ruin us both. Maybe we can fake it. Just something small." A statement that might placate her. Cassandra locked her jaw. Absolutely not. Yet the threats escalated over the next week. Miranda sent emails not just to James, but also to Cassandra's workplace claiming defamation. She posted cryptic messages on social media hinting at a real estate scandal that would blow up soon. James's boss called him into a meeting, warning him to get his personal matters under control, or else face termination. Faced with the very real possibility of financial and social ruin, James made a choice that would forever change Cassandra's view of him. He cornered her in the bedroom one evening, voice trembling with desperation. "You need to apologize to her," he said, eyes wild. "Just a short statement online, or maybe in person. We'll record it and send it to her. That's what she wants." Cassandra stared at him in horror. "You can't be serious. How dare you even suggest? I know it sounds insane, but I can't lose my job. We have a baby on the way. Think about our future." "Our future." Cassandra repeated, her tone incredulous. "There is no future if you force me into this." Her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. James gripped her hands. "Please just do it for me. For us against every instinct in her body." Cassandra agreed to a single meeting with Miranda, hoping she could reason with her. But reason proved futile in the face of a woman who saw only her own entitlement. And so the stage was set for the most humiliating act of Cassandra's life. The meeting took place in a small upscale cafe on the outskirts of town. The choice was Miranda's, who insisted on privacy away from the city centre. Cassandra could hardly contain her resentment as she arrived with James, each step feeling like a march toward her own mortification. Inside, Miranda was already seated at a corner table, a smug expression etched across her delicate features. She wore a sleek black dress hair styled immaculately, as though she were preparing for a magazine photo shoot. The sight of her made Cassandra's stomach churn. James pulled out a chair for Cassandra, but she refused his gesture and sat down stiffly. "Let's get this over with," Cassandra said, crossing her arms protectively over her belly. Miranda smiled, though her eyes were cold. "How sweet of you to join me." "Cassandra," she drawled, "I've been looking forward to our little chat." Cassandra bit back a retort. She could sense James's tension, and her own heart was pounding. She remembered the doctor's warning about stress, but she had no choice. This confrontation was inevitable. "So you want an apology?" Cassandra began, her voice brittle. "For what exactly?" Miranda leaned forward, playing with the straw in her iced latte. "Where do I start?" "For starters, for your husband's lies, blaming me for a situation he created, and for trying to paint me as some crazed stalker," James attempted to intervene. "Miranda, you know that." She cut him off with an elegant wave of her hand. "I'm speaking to Cassandra." Cassandra's anger flared. "You pursued a married man. You threatened me, insulted me, and now you're demanding I apologize for ruining your fantasy." Miranda shrugged. "James, and I shared something real. You, on the other hand, are clinging to a marriage that was never solid to begin with. If you'd just step aside gracefully, none of this would be necessary." Trembling with rage, Cassandra fixed Miranda with a steely gaze. "You're delusional. James is my husband, and I'm pregnant with his child. It's not me who needs to step aside." Miranda's lips curled into a predatory smile. "A child he never even told me about. He kept so many secrets. And that's your fault. You caged him." Cassandra felt as if she were conversing with a brick wall. "I'm done. This is nonsense." She began to rise from her seat, but James grabbed her arm, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Please, Cass." She froze, tears threatening. She realized that James was truly forcing her to bend to Miranda's will for the sake of damage control. In a moment of excruciating humiliation, Cassandra sank back into the chair. "Fine. If this is what you need to move on," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "I'll say I'm sorry for whatever you feel I've done to you." Miranda's eyebrows shot up. She pulled out her phone. "I want it recorded." James swallowed hard, shooting Cassandra a pleading look. She shut her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. Then, with Miranda's phone camera aimed at her, she spoke words that tasted of ash. "Miranda, I apologize for any part I played in making you feel unappreciated or wronged. I'm sorry if I ever judged you unfairly." It was a hollow statement, but Miranda's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. She stopped recording and placed the phone back into her purse. Now was that so hard? Cassandra stood abruptly, tears trailing down her cheeks. "I hope you're satisfied." Miranda gave a casual shrug. "We'll see if I decide this apology is enough. Maybe I won't escalate things." James turned to Miranda, voice strained. "Please let this be the end of it. You have your apology. Don't make things worse for everyone." Miranda smirked. "I'll consider it." As Cassandra stormed out, the world outside felt both surreal and suffocating. Anger and betrayal pulsed through her veins. How had it come to this? She had gone from a loving wife excited about her first child, to a broken woman compelled to apologize to her husband's mistress. Upon reaching the sidewalk, she leaned against a lamppost, tears blurring her vision. Laura, who had been waiting in a nearby car for moral support, rushed over. "Oh my God, Cass, are you okay?" Cassandra shook her head, sobs escaping her. "I did it, Laura. I actually apologized to that." That Laura enveloped her in a hug. "You did what you felt you had to." James caught up to them, his face etched with guilt. "Cassandra, wait." But she spun around, fury blazing through her tears. "Don't you dare speak to me right now. I hope you realize what you've done." With that, she ducked into Laura's car, and they drove off, leaving James standing helpless on the curb. Cassandra tried to compose herself, but inside, she knew this marriage, the marriage she once cherished, was irreparably shattered. The night after the forced apology, Cassandra slept fitfully. Each time she closed her eyes, she relived the moment in that cafe. Miranda's smug smile, James's silent acquiescence. She woke the next morning feeling drained and hollow, as though the baby inside her was the only thing tethering her to reality. That day, she made a decision she never thought she would. She reached out to a divorce attorney. Her name was Penelope Morris, an old acquaintance of Cassandra's father. Douglas, Penelope had a reputation for being tough, compassionate, and relentless in defending her clients, precisely the ally Cassandra needed. Penelope agreed to meet Cassandra at her office. Sitting in a minimalist waiting area lined with law textbooks, Cassandra clutched a folder containing evidence screenshots of Miranda's threatening messages, emails she had sent to Cassandra's workplace, and logs from the GPS tracker showing James's suspicious hotel visits. When Penelope entered, her presence was instantly calming. She was an older woman in a smart navy suit, silver hair swept into a neat chignon. After introductions, they settled in her office. Cassandra inhaled shakily. "I never imagined I'd be here. But I can't live like this anymore." Penelope folded her hands on the desk. "I understand. Why don't you start from the beginning? Tell me everything." Cassandra poured out her story, how she and James met the affair, the pregnancy, Miranda's demands, and ultimately the humiliating apology. Penelope listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "I won't sugarcoat this," Penelope said once Cassandra finished. "Divorce can be messy, especially when finances, potential reputational damage, and a child are involved. But from what you've told me, you have a solid case for significant damages. Emotional distress, potential defamation from the mistress, and a betrayal from James that led to a toxic situation." Cassandra felt a flicker of hope. "I just want to protect my baby and get out of this nightmare." Penelope nodded. "We can petition for full custody once the baby is born, or at least primary custody, with a robust support arrangement. But we'll need to gather more documentation, income statements, financial records, anything that can help us clarify your entitlement." The next hurdle was telling James. When Cassandra returned to the condo later that evening, her resolve hardened. She found James in the living room, fiddling with his phone. He looked up, relief washing over his features. "Where were you?" "I've been worried." She placed her bag down calmly. "I went to see a lawyer." "James." His eyes widened. "A lawyer? Yes, I'm filing for divorce." Those words hung in the air like a thunderclap. James's face paled. "Cassandra. Wait, it doesn't have to come to that?" "Aye." She held up a hand. "It does. You made me apologize to your mistress, James. That's not just a betrayal. It's cruelty." He lunged forward, desperation in his eyes. "I told you. I was desperate. I was afraid of losing my job, everything I've worked for. I never wanted things to go this far. Cassandra's voice cracked. You never wanted it to go this far, yet you let it. You cheated on me while I was pregnant, lied to me for months, and then forced me to grovel before your mistress. You call that love? He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I don't know what to say. I've messed up. I know I did. I'll do anything to fix this. Her jaw clenched. It's too late. I need to put myself and this baby first. She turned to leave. James scrambled up, following her into the bedroom. Cass, please. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes. Her throat tightened. For a brief, fleeting second, she recalled the good times, the shared dreams, the laughter, the love that once shimmered between them. But the memory of Miranda's triumphant smirk and James's willingness to degrade her overpowered any nostalgic longing. There's no going back from what you've done, she murmured, gathering a few essential items into a suitcase. I'm going to stay at Laura's place until the divorce is finalized. If you have any respect left for me, don't fight me on this. James looked shattered, tears forming in his eyes. But Cassandra steeled herself. She couldn't afford to let sentimentality cloud her judgment. With one last glance, she walked out the door, leaving James alone in the home that once symbolized their love. A new chapter had begun for Cassandra, though she entered it heavy with sorrow and anger. Every part of her heart ached, but a glimmer of liberation coursed through her veins. By taking control of her fate, she was honoring not just herself, but also the life growing inside her. Little did she know that fortune was about to favor her in ways neither she nor James could have anticipated. Over the following weeks, Cassandra threw herself wholeheartedly into building her case. Under Penelope Morris's guidance, she documented every harmful incident, the forced apology screenshots of Miranda's threats, evidence of James's ongoing infidelity, and financial records showing his ability to pay substantial spousal support. Simultaneously, Penelope prepared an airtight argument for full custody of the unborn child. While typically custody wasn't settled before birth, Penelope wanted it on record that Cassandra intended to safeguard her child from a toxic environment. It was unconventional but necessary, given the extent of James's betrayal and Miranda's disruptive presence. James, after being served divorce papers, responded with a mixture of panic and remorse. His own attorney attempted to negotiate a settlement out of court, but Cassandra, fueled by righteous anger and the need to protect her future, refused any half measures. One afternoon, James called her voice, trembling. "Look, I'll agree to almost anything, Cassandra, but please don't drag me through the mud, publicly. I'm already at risk of losing my position at Midtown Realty." Cassandra gripped the phone, her belly now significantly round. "You should have considered the consequences before forcing me to apologize to your mistress, James. I'm done protecting your image." A part of her felt guilty. She had once loved this man deeply, but she reminded herself of all the nights she cried alone, all the humiliations, all the fear for her unborn child. She steeled her resolve. The first hearing took place in a nondescript family courthouse in downtown Greenfield. Cassandra, dressed in a simple black maternity dress, clutched a folder of documents. Penelope stood beside her, exuding quiet confidence. James arrived in a tailored suit, looking 10 years older than he had just a few weeks ago. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and he kept glancing nervously around the corridor. Miranda, somewhat surprisingly, also appeared in the hallway, though she lacked standing in the official proceedings. She hovered near James, occasionally whispering in his ear. Cassandra caught fragments of her comments, snide remarks about Cassandra's pregnancy, about how unfairly she was treating James. When the judge finally appeared, everyone filed into the small courtroom. Cassandra felt her heart hammer against her ribcage. Though no formal custody orders would be issued until after the baby's birth, they could establish preliminary arrangements and glean the judge's stance on spousal support and property division. Penelope presented Cassandra's case systematically. She highlighted the marriage's breakdown due to James's infidelity, his reckless actions that subjected Cassandra to emotional distress, and the various documented threats from Miranda. She emphasized Cassandra's pregnancy, her need for financial and emotional stability, and the intangible damage done by forcing Cassandra to publicly apologize to a mistress. James's attorney tried to mitigate the damage. He argued that James's affair, while regrettable, didn't negate his rights to co-parent. He insisted that James had the means and the willingness to provide for the child should Cassandra be willing to share custody. The judge, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, listened impassively. However, when Penelope produced screenshots of Miranda's messages, including her demands and threats, the judge's expression turned grim. "I need more time to review this evidence," he said, glancing at James. "But I take these allegations of coercion and harassment very seriously, particularly given the emotional duress Mrs. Peterson faced during pregnancy. This will weigh heavily in my decisions regarding spousal support and custody arrangements." Outside the courtroom, tension crackled like static in the air. Miranda glared at Cassandra with open disdain, while James hovered uncertainly, torn between loyalty to his mistress and regret for losing his wife. Cassandra wanted nothing more than to escape the toxic atmosphere. Over the next few weeks, negotiations continued. James's attorney floated various settlement offers, ranging from generous spousal support to property buyouts. It was clear that James was desperate to avoid a drawn-out legal fiasco. His reputation at Midtown Realty was already precarious, and a public scandal could end his career altogether. Meanwhile, Cassandra soldiered on through her pregnancy. She leaned heavily on Laura and her family for emotional support. Douglas and Eleanor Evans, her parents, visited from Willow Grove, offering encouragement and practical help in setting up a nursery wherever she might eventually settle. As her due date inched closer, Cassandra sensed James's anxiety peak. He called her again, voice laced with desperation. "Cass, can we meet? Without lawyers, just to talk." After consulting with Penelope, Cassandra agreed to a meeting at a neutral location, a small conference room in Penelope's law firm. Though their lawyers would be nearby, she and James were allowed to speak alone if they wished. When she arrived, James was already there. Pacing, Miranda was conspicuously absent. The moment Cassandra stepped in, he rushed to pull out a chair for her. She eyed him warily, sinking into the seat. "What is it?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I want to settle this. I'll give you whatever you ask for. The condo, spousal support, child support. Just don't take away my right to see our child." Emotions tangled in Cassandra's chest. She remembered how he once read baby books with excitement in his eyes. She couldn't deny that beneath his betrayal, he might still love the unborn child. "I won't deny you visitation rights, unless the court deems it necessary," she said quietly. "But don't expect me to trust you overnight. This is about our baby's well-being." James nodded, seeming genuinely contrite. "I'll do whatever it takes." A few days later, the attorneys finalized a proposed settlement. Cassandra would receive primary physical custody once the baby was born, with James granted supervised visitation, at first due to concerns about Miranda's interference. James would pay substantial spousal support for a defined period, plus child support. The condo would be sold, and proceeds split, but Cassandra had the option to request a larger share given her circumstances. Penelope, though skeptical of James's sincerity, advised Cassandra that the offer was strong. They could likely secure even more if the case went to trial. But it would drag on. Ultimately, Cassandra decided to accept choosing stability and closure over prolonged litigation. What followed next, however, was nothing short of poetic justice. A wave of karma destined to crash upon James and Miranda in spectacular fashion. Just days after the settlement was drawn up, Cassandra received a sudden frantic call from Laura. "Have you seen the news?" Laura asked, voice trembling with excitement and shock. Cassandra, who had just finished a prenatal checkup, frowned. "What news?" "Miranda's in trouble." "Big trouble," Laura declared. "Check the local business headlines." Cassandra quickly pulled out her phone, her heart pounding. The top article read, "Real estate consultant Miranda Brooks arrested for fraud." She scanned the article, eyes widening at every word Miranda had been forging, client signatures and pocketing funds from phony real estate deals for months. A sting operation had finally brought her to justice. A swirl of emotions coursed through Cassandra. Relief, surprise, and an odd sense of validation melded together. She remembered the countless threats Miranda had flung her way, the smugness she exuded while demanding an apology. Now it seemed Miranda's own wrongdoing had caught up to her. Later that evening, James called his voice hoarse and panicked. "Cass Miranda's been arrested. The company is launching an internal investigation. They're pulling me in for questioning about our relationship. They think I might be involved." Though Cassandra was no fan of James's predicament, she felt a certain catharsis in hearing the fear in his voice. "Are you involved?" she asked quietly, half dreading his answer. "No," he said quickly, "but they found emails where she discussed deals with me. I'm not sure how they'll interpret them. This could end my career." Cassandra gripped her phone. "I'm sorry for you, but this is not my battle anymore." Her mind flashed back to all the times James dismissed her concerns or put her in humiliating positions. Now he was dealing with the fallout of trusting someone so morally bankrupt. In the days that followed, James was temporarily suspended from Midtown Realty, pending a full investigation. Miranda, meanwhile, faced serious criminal charges. Local news outlets covered the story, extensively relishing the scandal that rocked the real estate world. As for Cassandra, she focused on her health and well-being, letting Penelope handle any residual legal matters. The baby's due date was fast approaching, and she found solace in the unwavering support of her family and friends. When Cassandra finally went into labor nearly 3 weeks ahead of schedule, she rushed to Greenfield Hospital, her parents and Laura by her side. Amid contractions and the flurry of nurses, she couldn't help but wonder if James would show up. He did. Disheveled pale, and clearly stressed, he arrived in the waiting room, only to find Laura glaring at him. "Don't you dare cause her any stress right now," Laura warned. James nodded, his eyes filled with desperation. "I'm just here to see my child." After an arduous 15-hour labor, Cassandra gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Tears of joy replaced the months of sorrow as she held the tiny infant in her arms. She named her Sophia, Grace Evans, choosing to give her child Cassandra's maiden name for the time being, an act symbolic of her independence from James. James, permitted by Cassandra, entered the room briefly to meet his daughter. Tears filled his eyes as he cradled Sophia, dwarfed by blankets. Cassandra watched from the hospital bed, emotions warring within her. She saw the genuine love in his eyes for his child, but she couldn't ignore the pain he had inflicted. Once Sophia was stable and Cassandra was resting, James pulled up a chair, hesitant. "She's beautiful," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You did amazing." Cassandra offered a small nod, exhaustion evident on her face. "She is beautiful. She's the one good thing to come out of all this." He stared at the floor. I just want you to know, I'm sorry, so sorry." For everything, she didn't respond. What was there to say? She couldn't rewrite the past, nor could she absolve him of the choices he made. But for Sophia's sake, she hoped they could at least reach a place of civil coexistence. Not long after James faced further fallout at Midtown Realty, though the internal investigation cleared him of direct involvement in Miranda's fraud, his superiors viewed his relationship with her as a liability. They offered him a severance package to quietly resign. James's professional reputation took a devastating hit, making it difficult to secure another high-level position in the same industry. Cassandra, on the other hand, found a new momentum in her career. As her story quietly circulated through her network, she received an offer from a reputable online publication seeking a content editor. Her experiences lent her a deeper empathy, a newfound resilience that came through in her work. A few months later, at the final divorce hearing, the judge reviewed the updated circumstances. James had lost his high-paying job, but he still owed Cassandra the settlement agreed upon: spousal support, child support, and a share of the condo's proceeds. With Miranda's crimes and her humiliating demands now public record, the judge showed little sympathy for James. Cassandra walked out of that courtroom with full legal custody of Sophia, generous financial compensation, and the knowledge that she had stood up for herself, despite all odds. James, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered ambitions. Gone were the days of unbridled career success. Gone was the image of a perfect marriage. He had reaped the consequences of his choices. The sweet note of karma played in Cassandra's ears as she stepped into the sunlight with her lawyer at her side, baby Sophia safe with her grandparents. She inhaled deeply, an overwhelming sense of relief and triumph washing over her. Though her heart still bore the scars of betrayal, Cassandra was free from the secrets, the lies, and the toxic demands of a mistress with a twisted agenda. She had faced hell and walked out with her dignity, her future and her child's security intact. Cassandra's journey isn't just a story of betrayal, but a testament to the strength we discover when life hits us hardest. She endured the shock of infidelity, the humiliation of a forced apology, and the heartbreak of leaving the man she once loved. Yet through faith in herself and the love for her child, she claimed a better life, one marked by independence, healing, and a heart wide open to hope. If you found Cassandra's story gripping, if it stirred your emotions, made you root for her triumph, or reminded you of the power we each hold to reclaim our destiny, please show your support. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more real-life drama stories and powerful tales of perseverance. Together, let's continue to shine a light on the resilience that emerges when we confront adversity head-on. Your engagement helps ensure that stories like Cassandra's can inspire others to rise above. The anonymous email landed in my inbox at 2:17 a.m. The subject line was just 2 words: St. Jude's. Inside there was no text, only a link to a video that would detonate my life. It was raw, grainy security footage from the maternity ward of the very hospital where my husband Michael had supposedly mourned the loss of our stillborn son just 3 weeks earlier. But the video didn't show a grieving father. It showed a man I barely recognized, his face etched not with sorrow, but with a chilling, frantic energy. And the woman he was, with her hand clutching his, that woman wasn't me. They say the truth sets you free. But as I watched that footage, all I felt was the cold, hard reality of a lie so monstrous it would unravel not just a marriage, but the very fabric of who I thought we were. My world, the one I had so meticulously curated, was painted in shades of beige and pottery barn. It was a world of scented candles, Sunday brunches, and the soft, cashmere-wrapped dream of impending motherhood. Michael and I were that couple, the ones whose Christmas cards made other people vaguely resentful. He was a successful architect, all sharp lines and even sharper suits, with a smile that could disarm a hostile boardroom. I was a freelance graphic designer, a profession that allowed me the flexibility to nest, to obsess over paint swatches for the nursery, and to scroll endlessly through baby name forums. Our life in our sprawling suburban home just outside of Austin, Texas, was a testament to shared ambition, and I thought shared love. We'd met in college, a whirlwind romance that had settled into the comfortable rhythm of a decade-long marriage. We'd weathered his demanding career, my brief but intense flirtation with opening a bakery, and the quiet, creeping anxiety of trying for a baby. When the 2 pink lines finally appeared on the pregnancy test, it felt less like a surprise and more like a hard-won victory. Michael had wept. He'd dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to my still flat stomach, whispering promises to our unborn child. He was an exemplary, expectant father. He assembled the crib with an engineer's precision, attended every Lamaze class, and learned to expertly massage my swollen ankles. He'd talk to my belly for hours, telling our son, whom we'd already named Caleb, about the world he was about to enter. The pregnancy was, for the most part, idyllic. I'd lean into the stereotype, craving pickles and ice cream, and Michael would dutifully make midnight runs to the 24-hour grocery store. Our friends Mark and Sarah, who had 2 boisterous toddlers of their own, would watch us with a knowing, almost pitying fondness. "Just you wait," Mark would chuckle, ruffling Michael's hair. "Sleep now. You'll thank me later." The first fissure in our perfect world appeared so subtly, I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about a month before my due date. Michael called, his voice strained. "Sweetheart, I have to fly out to Chicago. A last-minute thing with the Harrison project. A major investor is threatening to pull out." Chicago now. I'd asked, a knot of disappointment tightening in my chest. We had a birthing class that evening. "I know, I'm so sorry, Amelia. I wouldn't go if it wasn't a 5-alarm fire. I'll be back Thursday, I promise. I love you. I love you both." He was so convincing, so genuinely apologetic, that I'd pushed my unease aside. It was his job. It was our future. But then, a few days after he was supposed to have returned, I was scrolling through Instagram. A girl I'd gone to college with, a bubbly blonde named Chloe Jenkins, who now worked in PR in Chicago, had posted a story. A picture of a crowded, trendy cocktail bar, the kind with Edison bulbs and artisanal gin, and there in the background, unmistakable even in the blurry periphery, was Michael. He was laughing, his head tilted back, a drink in his hand. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing a casual Henley, the one I always said brought out the blue in his eyes. And his arm was draped casually around the shoulders of a striking redhead I'd never seen before. My blood ran cold. I took a screenshot, my fingers trembling. When I confronted him, showing him the picture, he didn't even flinch. He looked at me with those earnest blue eyes and laughed. A short, dismissive sound. "Amy, sweetheart, you're seeing things. That's not even me. Michael, I know what you look like. It's a blurry photo. It's some guy who looks like me. And Chloe. You know, she's always been a bit of a drama queen. Probably just trying to stir something up. He pulled me into a hug, stroking my hair. You're hormonal, baby. It's okay. I was in meetings the entire time. I was miserable. I missed you and Caleb every second. He was so good. So plausible. He showed me his expense reports, a string of Uber rides to a bland corporate office park, a dinner for one at a generic steakhouse. He had an answer for everything. I wanted to believe him. The alternative was a chasm I wasn't ready to face. So I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of the impending birth was making me irrational. I deleted the screenshot. I apologized. And I tucked the incident away in a dark corner of my mind, a place I refused to visit. 2 weeks later, I went into labor. It was premature, a full 3 weeks early, but the doctors at St. Jude's Medical Center weren't overly concerned. The contractions came hard and fast. Michael was by my side, a rock. He held my hand. He breathed with me. He whispered encouragement. He was the perfect husband, the perfect father-to-be. The hours blurred into a haze of pain and fear. There were complications. The baby's heart rate was dropping. The calm, reassuring voices of the nurses started to take on a sharper edge. The room filled with more people. I remember the anesthesiologist's kind eyes, the cold sting of the epidural. I remember the doctor, a woman with a stern but compassionate face, saying, "We need to get him out now." Then nothing. A black, empty void. I woke up in a quiet, dimly lit room. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was gone. The bustling energy of the labor ward had been replaced by a heavy, oppressive stillness. Michael was slumped in a chair by my bed, his face buried in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. "Michael?" My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. He looked up, and his face broke me. It was a mask of utter devastation. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. Tears streamed down his cheeks unheeded. "He's gone, Amy." He choked out, his voice thick with a grief so profound it seemed to suck the air from the room. "Caleb, he didn't make it." The words didn't compute. They were just sounds, meaningless syllables that my brain refused to assemble into a coherent thought. I looked down at my body, at the flat expanse of my stomach beneath the thin hospital blanket. The life that had been there, the kicks and flutters that had become the rhythm of my days, was gone. The doctor came in and explained it in gentle clinical terms. Placental abruption, a rare catastrophic event. There was nothing anyone could have done. It was no one's fault. They were so sorry for my loss. The days that followed were a blur of unimaginable pain. I was a ghost, haunting the corridors of my own life. The nursery, once a room of joyful anticipation, became a mausoleum. Every tiny onesie, every perfectly folded blanket was a dagger to my heart. Michael was my shadow, my keeper. He handled everything. The hospital paperwork, the funeral arrangements, a small private service that I was too sedated to fully comprehend. He fielded the calls from concerned friends and family. He held me when I woke up screaming in the night. He seemed to be drowning in his own sea of grief. He lost weight. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. He'd sit for hours in the rocking chair in the nursery, just staring at the empty crib. He was the very picture of a bereaved father, and I clung to him. His grief was the only thing that validated my own. We were in this together, two shipwrecked survivors on a desolate shore. Our shared loss was the fragile raft that kept us afloat. I needed his pain to be as real as mine. It was the only thing that made sense in a world that had suddenly cruelly stopped making sense. The lie was perfect. It was seamless, comprehensive, and utterly devastatingly believable. He had built a fortress of sorrow around us, and I, his willing prisoner, had never once thought to check if the walls were real. The first 3 weeks after we lost Caleb were a suffocating fog. Time became a fluid, meaningless concept marked only by the rising and setting of the sun, which I mostly observed from the cocoon of my bed. Michael was my constant, my warden of grief. He brought me meals I didn't eat, coaxed me into showers I didn't want, and filled the silence with a steady stream of soothing, empty words. "We'll get through this, Amy. He'll always be our son. I love you so much." His performance was flawless. He never missed a beat. When my mother came to stay for a week, her own face a mirror of my sorrow, she'd watch Michael with tear-filled eyes. "You're a good man, Michael," she'd whispered to him in the kitchen one afternoon, a moment I overheard from the top of the stairs. "Thank God Amelia has you." He'd even begun to channel his grief into a project. He announced one evening, his voice heavy but resolute, that he was designing a memorial garden for the hospital, a place for parents like us. He'd said, his gaze distant, a place to remember the children we never got to hold. He'd spend hours at his drafting table, sketching intricate plans for fountains and benches and flower beds. It was all so noble, so heartbreakingly poignant. But grief is a strange and unpredictable beast. In its initial all-consuming phase, it blinds you. But as the raw, visceral agony begins to recede, even slightly, a new kind of clarity can emerge. Your senses, dulled by shock, slowly begin to sharpen. You start to notice things, small things, inconsistencies. The first crack was small, almost imperceptible. It was a bill, an itemized statement from the hospital. I'd found it in the mail which Michael had taken to sorting through before I saw it, to protect you from any unnecessary stress, he'd said. This one had apparently slipped through his filtration system. I scanned the list of charges, a morbid curiosity compelling me to relive the trauma in black and white. Anesthesia, operating room fees, pharmacy, and then a line item that made me pause. NICU, level 3 care, 3 days. NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. I frowned. Why would Caleb have been in the NICU? The doctor had been clear. It was a stillbirth. He was gone before he was born. There was no care, intensive or otherwise. I assumed it was a clerical error, a common enough occurrence in the bureaucratic labyrinth of healthcare. But the detail lodged itself in my mind, a tiny burr under the skin. The second crack appeared a few days later. Sarah, my best friend, came over bearing a casserole and a bottle of wine she knew I wouldn't drink. She sat with me on the couch, letting the silence hang comfortably between us, before she finally spoke. "How are you really?" she asked, her voice gentle. I gave her my standard, non-committal answer. "Getting by." She nodded, her eyes full of a sympathy that for the first time felt a little off. There was something else there, a hesitation, a flicker of pity. No, that wasn't it. It was something closer to discomfort. "Amy," she began, choosing her words carefully. "When Michael called us from the hospital, he was a wreck. Mark and we wanted to come right away, but Michael was so insistent. He said you didn't want to see anyone, that you needed space." "I did," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't face anyone. I get that, she said quickly. Of course I do. But he said something else. Something odd. I waited, my body tensing. He said that they had Caleb on life support. She said, her brow furrowed in confusion. He said you were both just waiting, making a decision. He was asking Mark about what that was like to let go. The casserole on my lap suddenly felt like a lead weight. Life support. A decision. This was a narrative I hadn't heard. A version of the story that diverged wildly from the one I had been told. He must have been confused, I said the words, tasting like ash in my mouth. He was in shock. We all were. Of course, Sarah said immediately, backing down, sensing my distress. That must be it. Oh, Amy, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have even brought it up. It's just... it stuck with me. But it stuck with me, too. It joined the NICU charge, another piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of Michael on the phone with Mark, fabricating a story about our son on life support, played on a loop in my head. Why? Why would he lie about something so specific, so sacred? Was his grief so profound it had created false memories? Or was it something else? The memory of the Instagram photo from Chicago, the one I had so willingly dismissed, resurfaced with a vengeance. The laughing man with his arm around the redhead. You're hormonal, baby. It's some guy who looks like me. My hands started to tremble. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Michael, who was sleeping soundly, a picture of peaceful exhaustion. I tiptoed into his home office, the room where he was designing his memorial garden, a sanctuary of his supposed sorrow. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent house. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I had to look. His laptop was closed on his desk. I opened it. It was password protected, of course. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried Caleb. The screen unlocked. A wave of nausea washed over me, using our dead son's name as a password. The thought was both sickening and, in a twisted way, perfectly in character with the grieving father he was pretending to be. His email was already open. I felt a pang of guilt, a lifetime of respecting his privacy, warring with the gnawing suspicion that was now consuming me. I clicked on his sent folder. There were emails to contractors about the memorial garden, emails to his colleagues, thanking them for their condolences. And then I saw it. A thread of emails with a woman named Jenna Reed. My breath hitched. The redhead from the Instagram photo. The emails went back months. They started professionally enough, something about a joint project between his firm and hers in Chicago. But the tone quickly shifted. They became familiar, flirty, intimate. They talked about meeting for drinks for dinner. They talked about her recent divorce. They talked about how alive he felt when he was with her. I scrolled down, my vision blurring with tears. The dates were a brutal chronological indictment. There was an email from the day he'd supposedly flown to Chicago for his 5-alarm fire meeting. From Michael Davenport to Jenna Reed. Subject: on my way, wheels up. Can't wait to see you. Counting the minutes. Ditch the boring conference dinner tonight. I found a place I think you'll love. And then I found the emails from the week Caleb had died. He'd been emailing her from the hospital, while I was in labor, while I was in surgery, while I was lying in a drugged haze, believing he was by my side, drowning in grief. From Michael Davenport to Jenna Reed. Subject: It's happening. Amelia's in labor. It's early. This is it. Talk soon. Then a few hours later. From Michael Davenport to Jenna Reed. Subject, Re. It's happening. It's a nightmare here. Complications. Don't know what's going on. I'll call you when I can. And then the email that made me physically recoil, a gasp escaping my lips. It was sent the morning after I'd been told our son was gone. From Michael Davenport to Jenna Reed. Subject, I need you. It's over. He didn't make it. It's for the best. I know we talked about this, the timing. It would have been impossible, but God, Jenna, it's still... I can't explain it. She's a mess. I have to be the strong one here. I have to play the part. But all I can think about is you. All I want is to be with you. This whole thing, it just makes me realize I can't live this lie anymore. As soon as I can, I'm coming to you. It's for the best. The timing. It would have been impossible. I have to play the part. The words swam before my eyes. The fortress he had built crumbled around me, and I saw the lie for what it was. It wasn't about shared grief. It was about an affair. It was about an exit strategy. The death of our son wasn't a tragedy he was enduring with me. It was a complication he was managing. A messy, loose end he needed to tie up so he could move on to his new life, his new woman. The NICU charge. The story about life support to Sarah and Mark. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. These weren't the ramblings of a grief-stricken mind. They were lies. Scaffolding to support a bigger, more monstrous lie. He needed a story that was dramatic, that required his constant attention, that isolated me, and made him the heroic, grieving husband. A story that bought him time. My grief, which had been a raw, open wound, was suddenly eclipsed by a rage so white-hot, it was almost dizzying. The man sleeping in my bed, the man whose tears I had wiped away, the man whose hand I had clung to, as if it were a lifeline, was a stranger, a monster. I closed the laptop, my movements stiff and robotic. I walked out of the office and back into our bedroom. I stood by the bed, looking down at his sleeping face. He looked so peaceful, so innocent, and I felt a chilling, terrifying calm settle over me. The fog had lifted, and in its place was a cold, hard certainty. I didn't know what the full truth was, but I was going to find out. And I was going to burn his world to the ground. It was in this state of cold fury in the dead of night, fueled by betrayal and a desperate need for irrefutable proof, that I did something I never would have imagined myself capable of. I thought about the hospital, St. Jude's, a place of immense pain, but also a place with answers. I thought about the inconsistencies, the lies. And I thought about the one thing that doesn't lie. Cameras. I sent an anonymous email to a local investigative journalist, a woman named Isabella Rossi, whose work I'd followed, known for her tenacity in uncovering institutional malfeasance. And then I sent another one from a different burner account to a victims' rights group that specialized in medical negligence. I didn't know what would come of it, but I had planted a seed. I had lit a match. Now all I could do was wait for the explosion. It came a week later in the form of that 2:17 a.m. email. The one with the subject line, St. Jude's. The one with the link that would change everything. I clicked it, and my world went from a nightmare into a living hell. The video player loaded a stark white box against the dark screen of my laptop. There was no sound, just the silent, unblinking eye of a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read 8:14 p.m. on the day Caleb died. The angle was from high in a corner, looking down on a section of a hospital corridor. It was unmistakably St. Jude's. The same pale green walls, the same polished linoleum floors I had stared at in a daze. The sign on the wall was blurry, but I could make out the letters NICU. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is it. A nurse in blue scrubs walked briskly past the camera. A doctor followed a moment later. Then from the left of the frame, Michael appeared. My Michael. He was wearing the same dark grey sweater I'd laid out for him that morning. But the man on the screen was not the devastated husband-to-be I remembered. His posture was rigid, his movements jerky and agitated. He was pacing, running a hand through his hair, his phone pressed to his ear. He looked trapped, cornered. He stopped pacing and leaned against the wall directly under the camera. He was talking animatedly, his free hand gesturing in frustration. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the panic in his body language. This was not a man waiting for news about his laboring wife. This was a man trying to control a situation that was spiraling out of his grasp. Then from the right of the frame she appeared. Jenna Reed. The redhead from the Instagram photo, the name in the emails. In the flesh. She was wearing a chic black coat, looking utterly out of place in the sterile hospital environment. She walked directly to Michael, her face a mixture of concern and impatience. I watched my breath caught in my throat as she reached him. She put a hand on his arm. He immediately flinched, pulling away, shaking his head and glancing nervously down the hallway in the direction of my delivery room. He said something to her, his expression hard and dismissive. She recoiled, her own face hardening. They began to argue, a silent, frantic pantomime of rage and recrimination. She jabbed a finger at his chest. He grabbed her wrist. She tried to pull away. It was ugly, vicious, a scene not of shared comfort, but of a clandestine meeting gone horribly wrong. This wasn't a friend offering support. This was a confrontation. And then the most damning moment of all. A doctor, the same stern-faced woman who had delivered the news of Caleb's death to me, walked towards them from the direction of the NICU. She had a clipboard in her hand. She approached Michael, her expression grave. Michael's entire demeanor shifted. The anger vanished, replaced instantly by a mask of gut-wrenching sorrow. He physically crumpled, leaning his head against the wall, covering his face with his hands. It was a performance. A switch flipped. Jenna stood by her arms crossed, watching him with a look of cold, calculating assessment. The doctor spoke to Michael for a few moments, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture of compassion. She pointed back towards the NICU. Michael shook his head vehemently. The doctor spoke again, her expression turning from sympathy to something more insistent. She seemed to be urging him towards the unit. He refused again, more forcefully this time, waving a hand dismissively. He said something that made the doctor's eyes widen in disbelief. Then she simply nodded, a look of profound sadness and perhaps a touch of disgust on her face, and walked away. Once the doctor was gone, Michael straightened up. The mask of grief fell away as quickly as it had appeared. He turned back to Jenna, his face a snarl of pure fury. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her roughly down the corridor, away from the NICU, away from my room and out of the camera's frame. The video ended. I stared at the blank screen, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed together with the force of a car crash. Caleb had been in the NICU. The bill was not a mistake. Sarah had not misheard. My son had been born alive. He had been alive, and he had been fighting for his life in a glass box just down the hall, and my husband, his father, had been in the corridor arguing with his mistress. The doctor had tried to bring him to his son. She was urging him towards the unit, and he had refused. The lie was so much more monstrous than I could ever have conceived. He hadn't just lied about an affair. He hadn't just lied about the timing of Caleb's death to make his getaway easier. He had lied about our son's entire existence. He had let me believe our child was stillborn, a silent, painless tragedy, when in reality Caleb had lived. He had breathed, and he had died alone without his mother while his father refused to even go see him. Why? The answer was right there in the video, in the cold, hard expression on Jenna Reed's face, in the frantic, trapped energy of my husband, a living, breathing baby, a premature baby who would require months of intensive care and a lifetime of devotion that was not part of their plan. It was the ultimate complication. A stillbirth was a tragedy you could mourn and move on from. A critically ill child was an anchor, a lifelong responsibility that would have chained Michael to me forever. So he made a choice. He chose his affair over his son. He rewrote the narrative. He turned our son's fight for life into a story of instantaneous death. He curated my grief, managed my reality, to fit his sordid escape plan. The rage that had been simmering inside me erupted into a volcanic inferno. It was a physical force, so powerful I thought it would tear me apart. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. I wanted to walk into the bedroom and wake him up, not with words, but with my bare hands. But then a different instinct took over, a cold, chilling calm. The same calm I'd felt when I'd decided to look at his laptop. This wasn't a private matter anymore. This wasn't a marital dispute to be settled with screaming matches and thrown pottery. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had committed an act of unimaginable cruelty against his own child. He had defrauded a hospital. He had lied to doctors. And he had enlisted his mistress as a co-conspirator. The leaked footage wasn't just my personal vindication. It was evidence. I forwarded the email with the video link to Isabella Rossi, the investigative journalist. My note was simple. This is security footage from St. Jude's Medical Center on the night of May 12th. The man in the video is Michael Davenport, a prominent Austin architect. He told his wife their son was stillborn. As you can see, that was a lie. Look into the NICU records. Look into Jenna Reed of Reed PR in Chicago. Look into the memorial garden he is currently fundraising for. He didn't just have an affair. He let his son die alone to save it. And then I forwarded it to the police. The story broke 2 days later. It wasn't just a local story. It went national. Isabella Rossi's article was a masterpiece of controlled fury, laying out the facts in stark, brutal detail. "The architect of a monstrous lie," the headline screamed. The article included stills from the security footage, Michael's face contorted in anger or Jenna's cold and watchful. It detailed the timeline, the emails, the hospital bill, the confirmation from anonymous sources at St. Jude's that baby boy Davenport had indeed spent 72 hours in the NICU before succumbing to complications of his premature birth. They had tried repeatedly to get the father to come and see the child, to authorize certain procedures, but he had been unreachable or unwilling to engage. The public response was instantaneous and savage. The story was a perfect storm of infidelity, betrayal, and the ultimate parental sin. Michael became a villain of almost cartoonish proportions overnight. His face was everywhere, on cable news, on tabloid websites, on social media feeds. The name Michael Davenport became synonymous with narcissistic cruelty. His firm fired him, issuing a public statement denouncing his deplorable and unethical personal conduct. The fundraising page for the memorial garden was taken down, but not before screenshots circulated online, a testament to his staggering hypocrisy. People found his social media, his firm's page, my own long-dormant accounts. The comments were a torrent of hatred. Monster. Psychopath. I hope he rots in hell. Jenna Reed was not spared. Her PR firm's website was flooded with one-star reviews. Her professional headshot was juxtaposed with the grainy security footage, still of her watching Michael's fake breakdown. She was branded the home-wrecking ghoul. Her career was incinerated in a matter of hours. I watched it all unfold from the guest room of Mark and Sarah's house. I had packed a single bag the morning after I saw the video and left before Michael woke up. I left my wedding ring on the pillow next to his head. I didn't leave a note. The entire world was about to leave him a note. My own role in the story was that of the tragic victim. The media painted me as the poor, grieving mother doubly betrayed by her monstrous husband. My photo, a smiling, pregnant shot from my Instagram, was splashed everywhere. I received an outpouring of sympathy from strangers around the world. It was surreal and strangely numbing. Their pity felt as distant and impersonal as their rage towards Michael. The only thing that felt real was the new agonizing truth about my son. Caleb. He had lived. He had a birth date and a death date. He had been a person in the world, however briefly. And this new knowledge brought with it a new kind of grief. It was sharper, more defined. I wasn't just mourning the loss of a dream anymore. I was mourning a real boy, a boy whose father had discarded him like a piece of trash. A few days after the story broke, Michael was arrested. The charge wasn't murder or anything as dramatic as the online mob wanted. It was fraud. He had knowingly provided false information to the hospital, leading them to misclassify the death and issue an incorrect death certificate. There were also questions about medical decisions that were delayed or not made because of his refusal to engage. It was a messy, complex legal situation, but for now, the fraud charge was enough to hold him. I saw his mugshot online. The handsome, charming architect was gone. In his place was a hollow-eyed, unshaven man with a haunted, terrified expression. He looked broken, but I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a vast, cold emptiness. The unveiling was complete. The perfect life, the perfect husband, the perfect grief, it had all been a lie. And now the truth in all its ugly, brutal glory was out for the world to see. I had gotten the truth. I had gotten my revenge. But as I sat in that quiet guest room, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, I had to face the terrifying question of what came next. The world loves a good villain, and Michael Davenport was tailor-made for the role. The media frenzy was relentless, a piranha-like swarm that stripped every detail of our lives down to the bone. Our wedding photos holiday, snaps my baby shower pictures. They were all repurposed as exhibits in the public trial of my husband. Each smiling image was now imbued with a sinister irony. Look at the happy couple just months before he let their baby die. I remained sequestered at Mark and Sarah's, a voluntary prisoner in their suburban guest room. They were magnificent, acting as gatekeepers against the world. They fielded calls from reporters, deflected nosy neighbors, and kept me supplied with tea and tissues. Sarah would sit with me for hours, not pressing me to talk, just offering a solid, comforting presence against the tsunami of chaos. My grief for Caleb had transformed. The murky, undefined sorrow of losing a stillborn child was replaced by the sharp, specific agony of mourning a son I never knew. I requested the full medical records from St. Jude's. They arrived in a thick manila envelope, and I read them with a forensic intensity. I learned his weight, 3 pounds, 2 ounces. His length, 15 inches. I read the nurse's notes, their neat professional script detailing his every struggle. Infant exhibiting respiratory distress. Apnea episodes increasing in frequency. Attempts to contact father unsuccessful. These clinical details were both torture and a strange kind of solace. They made him real. He wasn't just a phantom kick in my belly. He was a tiny person who had fought. The knowledge was a knife in my heart, but it was a real knife, not the phantom pain I'd been living with. I was no longer grieving a possibility. I was grieving a person. And with that came a new, focused anger. Not just at Michael, but at myself. How had I not known? How could a mother not feel on some primal cellular level that her child was alive? The guilt was a heavy cloak suffocating me. Michael denied bail due to being a flight risk, and the sheer public outrage languished in county jail. His high-powered family in Connecticut hired a top-tier legal team led by a shark of a defense attorney named Marcus Thorne, who immediately went on the offensive. Thorne's strategy was clear paint Michael not as a monster, but as a man who had suffered a profound psychological break. Mr. Davenport was under unimaginable stress. Thorne declared on the courthouse steps, his voice oozing sincerity. The impending birth, the pressures of his career, and a marriage that was already quietly fracturing led to a dissociative episode. He created a false narrative, not out of malice, but because his mind simply could not cope with the reality of his son's critical condition. This is not a case of fraud. It's a case of profound mental trauma. It was a brilliant, insidious defense. It attempted to reclaim the narrative of grief that Michael himself had so expertly woven. I watched the press conference on TV, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. A psychological break. He hadn't had a break. He'd had a plan. The emails to Jenna were proof of that. Speaking of Jenna, she had vanished. Her social media was deleted, her firm's website was offline, and her office was shuttered. The press couldn't find her. But the police did. She was located in a luxury spa resort in Arizona, having fled Chicago the day the story broke. They brought her back to Austin for questioning. She was not charged with a crime, she had broken no laws, but she was a material witness, and facing the ruin of her career and the full force of public condemnation, she decided to save herself. She made a deal with the prosecutors for immunity in exchange for her testimony. Her deposition was leaked to the press, of course. Every sordid detail. She recounted how she and Michael had met, the thrill of their affair, their shared fantasy of a future together. And then she came to the part about the baby. According to Jenna, the pregnancy had been a crisis point. Michael had assured her he would leave me, but the baby complicated everything. Her version of events painted Michael as weak and indecisive a man, panicking as his carefully compartmentalized life began to converge. He told me the baby would trap him, her deposition read. He said that if the baby was born healthy, he'd never be able to leave. The guilt would be too much, the societal pressure too great. We were in the hotel in Chicago when Amelia went into labor. He was a mess. He kept saying, "This is a disaster. This ruins everything." The most chilling part of her testimony concerned the hours at the hospital. She admitted to going there to confront him, to demand he make a choice. And she described the moment he learned Caleb was alive, but critically ill. He came out of the delivery area, and his face was white, she stated. He said, "It's alive, but it's sick. They don't think it's going to make it." And then he looked at me, and I saw a look in his eye. It was cold, calculating. He said, this could be a way out, a clean break. He decided right then and there. He told me the plan he would tell Amelia the baby was stillborn. He said it would be kinder that way. A quick, tragic end, instead of weeks or months of false hope. He said it would let them grieve together, and then, when the time was right, they could go their separate ways. He said it was the only way to manage the situation without destroying everyone. Kinder. He had called this monstrous selfish deception an act of kindness. He had appointed himself the arbiter of my grief, the editor of my reality, to facilitate his escape into a new life. Jenna's testimony destroyed Marcus Thorne's psychological break defense. This wasn't a man unmoored from reality. This was a man executing a premeditated, cold-blooded plan. The fallout from Jenna's deposition was a second explosion ripping through what little was left of our social circle. People were forced to take sides. My side was easy. The wronged wife, the grieving mother. His was impossible. His friends, his colleagues, even some of his family publicly disavowed him. He was utterly alone. One evening, Mark came into the guest room, a grim look on his face. "You got a letter," he said, holding it out as if it were contaminated. "From him. It was sent here from his lawyer." I took it from him, my hand steady. I hadn't heard a single word from Michael since I'd left. No calls, no texts, no emails. Just the public pronouncements of his lawyer. I slit the envelope open. The letter was written on a piece of yellow legal paper, his familiar architectural script looking alien and obscene. "Amelia, I know you will never forgive me. I don't expect you to. I don't forgive myself. Listening to Thorne talk in court, listening to what Jenna said, it's like hearing about a stranger, a monster. I don't know who that man was. The pressure, the lies, it all just avalanched. I was suffocating and I made a choice, a terrible, unforgivable choice. I see his face now, Amy. The nurses at St. Jude's, they showed me a picture. After it was over. I wouldn't look at the time. I refused. But they put a photograph in my discharge file. I found it when I was looking for paperwork for Thorne. I've been looking at it every night here in my cell. He looked like you. He had your nose. I destroyed everything. I destroyed you. I destroyed our son. I destroyed myself. I know sorry is a pathetic, meaningless word. It's an insult. But it's the only one I have. Don't let this destroy you. Please. You are a good person. You deserved a good life, a good husband. You deserved to be Caleb's mother. And I stole that from you. Michael. I read the letter twice. There was no rage left in me. No fire. Just a profound, bone-deep weariness. His apology, his self-pity, his supposed realization, it was all too little too late. It was the pathetic whimper of a man who had been caught. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry for the consequences. He looked like you. He had your nose. The words were meant to be a bridge, a shared detail of our son. But all it did was highlight the chasm between us. He had a photograph, a picture of our son's face. And he had kept that from me, too. Another secret, another layer of his betrayal. I folded the letter neatly. I did not rip it up. I did not burn it. I placed it in the manila envelope with Caleb's medical records. It was just one more piece of evidence in the case file of my shattered life. The unraveling was almost complete. The lies had all been exposed, the villain had been caged, and the truth was a harsh, unforgiving glare. All that was left was the trial, and the daunting task of figuring out how to live in the scorched earth he had left behind. The trial of Michael Davenport was a spectacle. It felt less like a legal proceeding and more like the final act of a grim, nationally televised play. I was there for every moment, a silent, black-clad figure in the front row. I refused to let the media's portrayal of me as a fragile, broken victim define me. I needed to bear witness. I owed it to Caleb. Michael, clad in an ill-fitting suit, looked like a ghost. The charm and confidence that had once been his armor were gone, replaced by a hollowed-out resignation. He rarely looked at me. When our eyes did meet across the courtroom, his were filled with a desperate, pleading shame. I felt nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. The prosecution, armed with the security footage, the emails and Jenna Reed's damning testimony, laid out their case with brutal efficiency. They painted a picture of a cold, narcissistic man who viewed his own child as a complication to be managed. They called nurses from St. Jude's to the stand who testified through tears about baby boy Davenport's fight for life and their frustrating, futile attempts to get his father involved. He told me on the phone, "There's no point in me coming down there. It's a foregone conclusion." One veteran NICU nurse testified, her voice thick with contempt. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen parents in denial, in shock, in every state of grief imaginable. I have never, ever seen a parent so indifferent." The defense, hamstrung by Jenna's testimony, did their best to salvage the psychological break narrative, but it rang hollow. Marcus Thorne put a psychiatrist on the stand who spoke of narcissistic personality disorder and acute stress reactions. But under cross-examination, even he had to admit that Michael's actions, the meticulous lies, the cover-up, the manipulation of me demonstrated a high degree of planning and cognitive function, not a break from reality. The moment that will forever be seared into my memory was when the prosecution introduced the photograph of Caleb into evidence, the one Michael had mentioned in his letter. They had retrieved it from his files. An evidence technician projected it onto the large screens in the courtroom. And there he was, my son. He was so tiny, nestled in a tangle of wires and tubes. His skin was translucent, his eyes were closed, and his tiny chest was still. But he was beautiful. He was perfect. He had my nose, and a shock of dark hair, just like Michael's. A sound escaped my lips, a raw, guttural sob that I couldn't contain. The courtroom, which had been buzzing with whispers, fell utterly silent. In that moment, he was not baby boy Davenport, the tragic figure in a news story. He was Caleb, my Caleb, and the world was finally seeing him. I saw Michael crumple at the defendant's table, his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. For the first time, his grief looked real, but it was a selfish grief. Grief for himself, for the life he'd lost, the man he'd failed to be. It had nothing to do with the tiny boy on the screen. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. The verdict was guilty. Guilty of felony fraud. Guilty of reckless endangerment. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman, delivered the sentence a week later. She spoke directly to Michael, her voice dripping with scorn. "You did not just lie, Mr. Davenport," she said, her eyes boring into him. "You constructed an alternate reality of unimaginable cruelty. You weaponized your wife's grief and love for you to cover your own pathetic infidelities. You treated the life and death of your own son as an inconvenience to be managed. Your crime is not just against the state or the hospital. It is a crime against humanity, against the very definition of fatherhood. It is one of the most profound acts of narcissistic cruelty I have ever witnessed from this bench." She sentenced him to the maximum possible term, 10 years in state prison. A gasp went through the courtroom. 10 years. It was a harsh sentence for fraud, but it was clear the judge was sentencing the moral crime, not just the legal one. I walked out of the courthouse into a sea of cameras and reporters. I didn't stop. I just kept walking, Mark and Sarah flanking me like bodyguards. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt quiet. The noise that had been roaring in my head for months had finally subsided. It was over. The weeks and months that followed were a slow, painful process of rebuilding. I sold the house, the one with the beige walls and the nursery that had become a mausoleum. I couldn't bear to be in it another second. I took my half of the assets and moved into a small, bright apartment in a different part of Austin, a part of the city that held no memories of him. I legally changed my last name back to my maiden name, Amelia Shelton. It was a small act, but a significant one. I was no longer Amelia Davenport. That woman, the one who believed in the Pottery Barn fantasy, was gone. She had died with Caleb. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma and grief. We talked about Caleb. We talked about Michael. We talked about the complex, tangled knot of my own guilt and rage. She helped me understand that I couldn't have known that I was the victim of a master manipulator, and that my body and mind, under the trauma of childbirth and what I believed was catastrophic loss, had been in survival mode. I never spoke to Michael again. His lawyers reached out regarding the divorce proceedings, which were swift and uncontested. He signed everything, gave me everything I asked for. It was his final futile act of penance. I heard through the grapevine that Jenna Reed had moved to another state, changed her name, and was attempting to start over forever, branded by her association with the case. I found I didn't have the energy to hate her. She was just another piece of wreckage in the blast zone of Michael's lies. My life now is quiet. It is small. I still work as a graphic designer, but I find my greatest solace in volunteering at a local animal shelter. The uncomplicated, unconditional affection of the abandoned dogs and cats is a balm to my soul. I have a framed copy of Caleb's photograph on my nightstand. It's the only picture I have of him, the one from the courtroom. I look at it every day. I tell him good morning and I tell him good night. I tell him about my day. I tell him that I love him. I am in my own quiet way, finally getting to be his mother. The grief for him will never go away. It has become a part of me, a shadow that walks beside me. But it is no longer an all-consuming darkness. Sometimes it is even a source of strength. It reminds me of what is real, of what is important. It reminds me of the devastating cost of lies. I don't know if I will ever trust anyone fully again. I don't know if I will ever remarry or have more children. The future is not a bright, shining path anymore. It is a quiet, winding road, and I am taking it one step at a time. I have survived the unimaginable. I have walked through the fire of the ugliest of truths, and come out on the other side. I am scarred, I am changed, but I am still here. And in the quiet of my new life, for the first time in a very long time, that feels like enough. The story of Amelia and Michael is a harrowing reminder that sometimes the most devastating monsters are the ones sleeping right beside us, hidden behind a mask of love and concern. It's a story about the corrosive power of lies and the unimaginable depths of betrayal. But it's also a story of survival of a woman who walked through an inferno of public humiliation and private agony to reclaim her own truth and find a way to honor the son who was stolen from her twice. If this story touched you, if it made you think, if it made you feel, please take a moment to hit that like button to help us share it with more people. More importantly, leave a comment below. What part of Amelia's story resonated with you the most? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story that peels back the layers of the human experience and reveals the truth, no matter how shocking it might be. Thank you for listening.